Welcome to the February meeting of the Australian Zonta Says Now think tank, our first for 2025. My name's Carol Theobald and I'm speaking to you today from the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people in Western Australia. Technology permitting, I will be joined today by Bridget Mather, Sandra McLean, Cheryl Scott, Sandra Burns, Sue Lees and Bernadine Guy. Before we begin, I'd like to cover some housekeeping. Say hi in the chat and tell us where you're calling from today. Please use the chat line to make comments. Keep your microphone on mute, ask short, succinct questions, and use welcoming and inclusive language. Thank you. We may have a visitor during our session, Jane Baker, who was the winner of the District 23 Women Taking Climate Action Award. So keep your eyes open for her. She'll try and join us between serving customers at her gin distillery. Today's focus is in what we can do in the upcoming elections. So I'll hand over to Bridget Mather, the chair of Zonta Australia, based in South Australia, to get us started. Over to you, Bridget.
Thanks, Carol. And just to let you know, I've been relegated to the bedroom because I've got a house full of grandchildren. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge also the traditional owners on whose land we meet today. And for me, it's the Kaurna people. Normally for my work, it's the Ngarrindjeri, and I know for each of you, it'll be somewhere different. We also usually acknowledge a female First Nations leader at the start of each meeting. And for today, given that we have a focus on elections and everything to do with politics, we will spotlight, I think, the former Senator Nova Peris OAM from the Northern Territory. Nova came to public attention when she was a member of the gold medal Hockeyroos in 1996 in Atlanta, and then she became the Young Australian of the Year. She then changed sports. It's overachieving, isn't it, really, when you think about it? You can change sports. And then won another medal in the Commonwealth Games in Malaysia in 1998. She was elected to the Senate in the Northern Territory in 2013 and would have had to overcome many obstacles in creating history, being the first Aboriginal woman to be elected to the federal parliament. So we now will go, I think, Carol, to the videos. Is that right? And we're going to look at why Zonta Says Now and why we need this type of focus around the world.
You ready?
We're ready.
You hear it? Sound okay?
Thank you, Carol, for that. And I know that, as you can see from the display, it's best used on a mobile phone. It's designed for mobile phones, which is where most of us now get most of our information and use every day. And we're also working, Carol, is that right, with ZI to just smooth
Yes.
it out a little bit. Mind you, it's not too bad, even though I think it's a draft. There's still, it's looking good. So we also have another video now to play, which is really about the lead up to the election, and we're taking some lead from the US caucus who have just been through this process. So, Carol, you're going to put on the next video, is that right?
Yes, I am. It's this one. Can you see it now?
Yes,
Oh,
but we're not getting the words.
No, there's no sound. Ah,
there it is. Yay. I love that last comment. If we're not at the table, we may be on the menu.
how true, how true.
Okay.
So, Carol, I'm assuming that the US caucus may let us use this if we put
Yes.
some Australian. I mean, the content is fine. I think we just really have to change the logo, and then it would be more than suitable for most clubs around Australia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And change organisations with an S.
Yes, that is true. Yes.
Constantly in our lives, isn't it?
Mind you, most people don't recognise that even in our very Americanised world. But anyway, I agree.
Yeah.
Also, they also need to update the tagline. They're talking about empowering women through service and advocacy.
Yeah. Yes. It's been for a while. So
Yeah.
I wonder, Carol, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Vicky.
I mean, I'm sure we're all wondering, and maybe you discussed it before I came on board. Zonta International being based, headquartered in the US, must be feeling just a little bit very apprehensive at the moment with President Trump undermining the US aid agency. Undermining is a euphemistic term.
Yeah.
And also sort of firing scattergun at any government department or even NGO that mentions the word gender or diversity.
Which is why we have to keep on our guard here.
I'll
hand over.
Very worrying.
Yeah.
And also, President Trump has foreshadowed the UN pulling out from the WHO, which we as a partner with the UN must be very concerned about.
Horrendously.
Victoria, I think there are many things that should prompt us to action, and I think that overwhelmingly shows why today's discussion, I think, is so important, because I don't think we can take anything for granted, and we have a national election or federal election coming up in, well, somewhere before May. and the WA state election on the 8th of March. So we have an opportunity, I think, to be very visible and to be coordinated in what we need to do. And some of the conversation today will be just really about that. What is the best format for raising the issues with our local candidates? And I suppose you can't force them to respond, but how can we maximise the opportunity for them
Yes.
to respond?
And Bridget, you know, we have to be so careful not to be sucked into any falsely contrived culture wars too, don't we?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So at this point, I think I'm handing over to you, Sandra, to talk a little bit more of the political content, particularly from climate and the impact of climate on women.
That's right. Thanks, Bridget.
Do you think we should go across to Jane now while we've
I was
got
just
it here?
looking to see, I can't see her. I think she, oh yes, she is.
There
Got
she
her.
is.
I see her now. Yes, we'll put you on spotlight now. I can see you. I'll just
Spotlight. Oh, I'm not really. I've been in the vineyard all today, so I'm looking very windswept. I'm sorry.
that's okay. It's lovely
So-
that you pop in, Jane.
Well, thank you. It's exciting to hear about so much work that you've got ahead of you. So yeah, pleased to join for a short moment.
Yeah. Well, we, as other members may not realise, that Jane and her business, Mrs. Baker's Stillhouse, won the District 23 Women Taking Climate Action Award, and it's a really wonderful example of a lovely sustainable business model in more ways than one. And what inspired you to get into it, Jane?
Into this business. Well, you know, it's that age-old thing of, you know, a journey is a chain of small steps. So we planted a vineyard 25 years ago, but 9 years ago we started distilling, which is when Mrs. Baker's Stillhouse as a business started. So well, I like gin, maybe might be the reason.
Is there anything? Is there anything in the upcoming election that concerns you? What things are you looking out for as a small business owner in the sustainability area? Let's put you on the spot, isn't
it? We're members of the Australian Distillers Association, who are very active, working, looking about the high taxes that happen on spirits making in Australia, which is we're taxed the greatest in any part of the world. So which makes international imports much cheaper. So someone like Dan Murphy's can stock spirits made overseas, which even though they've done all the bottling and traveling over from across the world, it's cheaper for them because of the tax laws that we have on our business. So that's one thing. And I guess just sort of in my heart, I'm always looking for who's got a better green policy is really what we're always looking out for.
Excellent. So you get the support. Well, congratulations. Sue, did you want to say
Yeah, Jane, Sue Lees, I've been talking to you yeah, about the award and that. So I was very impressed with your business, and we all were. The fact that you're using so much solar, that you've really got processes in each stage of your distillery of being as environmental and as energy efficient as possible. And I suspect that one of the things that we're going to be quite concerned about in this election is that basically electrifying as much as possible of the power system. And do you think business-wise it's been a really good decision for you to have basically gone down that path in terms of energy prices and that?
Oh yes, certainly. There was a number of reasons we went for solar. We're a little bit remote. We're not on the main transmission lines. So although we're connected to grid line power, we're not three-phase, we're single-phase electricity out here, which means, and now still requires three-phase electricity. So we could have had Powercorp put a very large transformer at our front gate, basically, and that would have cost us about $300,000. So therefore, Powercorp could then charge us more money. We just looked into the solar and went with solar because our installation cost less than $3,000, and most of the time we'd pay no bill, and we actually get money back because we feed into the grid, which means Powercorp pays us for taking the cheaper option, which is kind of sweet.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, thank you, Jane, for joining us today. You're more than welcome to stay and listen into the session for a while, and congratulations on everything you do. It's brilliant.
Well, thank you very much for recognising us. And I have to say, what's the magazine? Country Style. We've got an article coming up in Country Style. I think it's the May issue, which comes out towards the end of April. And I think they're going to talk about the Zonta Award in that as well. So that's a good thing as well. So, the love goes around.
Excellent. Sue?
I was just going to say, Jane, I'll be talking to you before the March meeting for the Zonta Club of Melbourne on Yarra, and you're doing a plug for us, so I'm just about to do a plug for you, because I have actually bought some of the gin, and we had it at a Zonta meeting at my place, and it was voted fantastic. That was the Christmas gin. So.
The Christmas, that's right.
Absolutely delicious.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jane, and you're very welcome to stay and listen in for a while. Whatever you're welcome to do, whatever's comfortable for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so go back to Sandra McLean. Over to you, Sandra.
Thanks, Carol. Hi, everybody. Yes, I just wanted to remind you of the Zonta Says Now statement on climate change, which is, I guess, where we would like to align ourselves and align Zonta. And I guess we should use that as a bit of a framework to try and think about where we would like to go in relation to any activity we might want to undertake. So the statement calls on governments to meet their climate justice obligations under the Paris Agreement, and end fossil fuels as quickly as possible, to integrate gender-sensitive measures into climate policies and planning, and have more women in decision-making, which is pretty critical, educate on social economic consequences of climate change and skills for the future, and also to enable women's full participation in the economy through childcare, elder care, and to reduce the pay gap. Importantly, especially at this time, and we've got so many disasters happening around the world, and one in Queensland at the moment in the north, to include women in disaster preparedness planning that includes women's health and safety needs. And so, in summary, we're looking at meeting some of those obligations under the Paris Agreement and gender equality. So I don't expect you all to memorise that, but yeah, you can. It is on the Zonta International website, so you can use it as a reference.
Mm-hmm.
So climate change impacts our quality of life. But how do we measure it? So some countries use their success by measuring GDP, which is gross domestic product, but more mature countries are moving to use a measurement around well-being and having a well-being budget. I think New Zealand did that in their, they had a well-being budget as they measure overall life satisfaction rather than dollars. So Australia also developed a national wellbeing framework in 2023 that produces a measuring what matters statement each year. And that framework helps us to better understand what matters most to Australians. And that is building a better, healthy life, a secure, sustainable, cohesive and prosperous Australia for everyone. So I guess the question we have to ask ourselves, will future governments continue with this approach, and how can we, I guess, ensure that they do in relation to what we're seeking through our Zonta International Statement on Climate Change? So how is Australia meeting our obligations under the Paris Agreement? So you'll see a graph in front of you, which I know Carol loves graphs. So many countries measure their success, as I said, by GDP, but this graph will show you what we report to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And so we, as in Australia, has legislated for 2 targets at 2030, which is not that far away, and 2050. So they're pretty close. So the vertical dotted line is 2005, Australia's baseline year, and the horizontal dotted line is our target for a 43% reduction on 2005 levels by 2030. So what does that mean? It means by 2030, we need to get greenhouse gas emissions down to 1 million tonnes a day in Australia. So, and then we need to get to net zero by 2050. We're making progress, but we've got a long way to go. So the good news is there are a number of policies in place, and we'll provide you with some information after this session. So the Climate Change Act legislated our targets and required an annual climate statement. The 2024 statement shows that to build a clean energy workforce, we need to remove the barriers to getting more women into trades. What else have we got? We've got the National Net Zero Plan, which will show us how to get to net zero by 2050. But this is still under development. Australia also hopes to co-host COP31 with a Pacific Island nation in 2026. As everyone's probably aware, the Pacific Island nations are, I guess, most concerned about climate change and how that will impact on their lives. And if this happens, it would be a great opportunity to raise awareness. However, the Turkish government also wants to host it, so we'll see what happens in that international battle. And in regards to policies, we also have the 82% renewable energy target by 2030, which is underpinned by the Powering Australia and Rewiring Australia policies. And these aim to provide jobs and to rebuild our ageing transmission wires. And I mean, we see on the news every day how we have issues around all of our aging infrastructure. And not only the costs to fix that, but also the cost to fix them while we're also trying to move into renewables. Then there's also the National Energy Performance Strategy that is all about making households and businesses more energy efficient, transitioning to an all-electric homes and using appliances to spread the load on the power system. And in November, the Future Made in Australia Act was passed, which is investing $23 billion over 10 years for the future. So that is about investments in renewable hydrogen, green steel, clean energy, manufacturing of batteries and solar panels. And there are lots of jobs coming out of this, but women need to be trained to do them so they don't miss out. So I'll now hand over to Cheryl in New South Wales to tell us some not so good news.
Thanks, Sandra. It's not so good news in Australia's reputation when it comes to approving fossil fuel developments. What we save in one hand, we spend in the other. The graph shows the number of coal and gas projects approved since 2019. There are over 100 new coal, oil and gas projects in the pipeline. Since May 2022, 10 new coal mines or expansions have been approved. Currently, the Federal Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, has hard decisions to make. It does not matter which party is in power, they all have to make some hard decisions. Hard because the amount of influence being exerted by fossil fuel lobbyists. The Australian government, state and federal, provided $14.5 billion worth of subsidies in the fossil fuel industry in 2023-24, nearly a third more than the previous year. Subsidies are going up. The fossil fuel subsidy equates to over $27,000 a minute, $27,000, or $540 per person each year. You have to remember that fossil fuel companies also make big donations to the major political parties. Is any party going to bite the hand that feeds it? So, against the background, the Minister's next big decision is whether or not to approve the expansion of Woodside's Burrup hub in Western Australia. This would give a 46-year extension to a gas processing plant in Western Australia. Most of the gas will be exported as LNG. The huge project will account for up to 6.1 billion tonnes of global greenhouse gas emissions during its lifetime, or over a third of a million tonnes per day over nearly 50 years. For scale, remember we are trying to get Australia's total national emissions down to 1 million tonnes a day by 2030. More emissions eventually means more extreme weather, more social disruption, and more inequality. Young people are very worried about these projects and the impact they will have on their future. Anjali Sharma was our guest speaker at the October think tank. She's working with Senator David Pocock to get a duty of care bill adopted in Australia so that decision makers must consider the health and well-being of children in Australia when making significant decisions. In 2024, the Senate Committee on Communications and the Environment rejected the bill. The committee said that the Child Rights Impact Assessment tool should be used to assist in policy-making decisions. Well, we have seen how well the Gender Impact Assessment tool is used, so there is not much confidence that the tool will have enough clout to make a difference. So now Anjali and the team are trying to get more support around Australia. In January, they prepared an open letter signed by over 50 prominent Australians calling on the government to legislate a duty of care on climate. Anjali also went to Vanuatu, where she discussed the action that is being taken at the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice is the court of the United Nations. Vanuatu, supported by the UN General Assemblies, seeks an advisory opinion on how governments should respond to the climate crisis. This is a huge court case, and a non-binding decision is expected this year. However, it will carry legal weight and more authority to influence the outcome of climate change court cases around the world. Just be aware that it exists. So here is a summary of some key climate-related issues. Measuring what matters. Well-being budgets. Educating women in trades and STEM and future industries. Energy-efficient homes and businesses. Phase out new fossil fuel projects. Co-hosting COP31. Duty of care for future generations. Whew, that was a lot of hard news. I'll now hand over to Sandra Burns in Victoria. Thanks, Sandra.
Thanks, Cheryl. I'm here in Melbourne, in Naarm, on Wurundjeri country. So hello to everyone. So we have been looked at reducing emissions. Now look at the gender equality areas. We've already covered getting skills for the future. The remaining issues relate to decision-making, economic participation, and disaster preparedness, including health and safety. Last year, the government launched Working for Women, the national 10-year gender equality strategy. As you can see, it covers 5 areas that are very similar to our gender equality areas in the Statement on Climate Change. This one-pager shows the ambitions and the priority areas. Let's look at the priority areas in a little more detail. Gender-based violence initiatives include family and domestic violence leave, responding to violence in universities, the plan for First Nations women and children, housing options for women in crisis and older women at risk of homelessness, limiting children's access to pornography, and improving women's experience in the justice system. Also, please be aware of the work of the Gender and Disaster Australia that addresses harmful stereotypes in disasters. And a quote here, "Our research leaves us no doubt that expectations of men to protect and provide in disasters and of women to put their own needs last for the good of the man, the family and the community leads to increased family violence and men's self-harm and suicide." Actions around unpaid and paid care include paid parental leave scheme, childcare affordability, addressing low pay in care and community sector, the National Carer Strategy, valuing unpaid work in tax and social security structures, and removing financial disincentives for students entering care and support sector. It costs money to do placements on their courses. Economic equality and security includes publishing the real take-home pay of employers with more than 100 employees to see what the gender pay gap really is, supporting Equal by 30, a program to get more women into the clean energy sector, improving child support compliance, implementing the pathway to diversity in STEM, improving the safety and economic outcome of migrant women, and supporting women's access to housing. So you can see there is a lot that's happening, a lot of information out there. So that's just to remind you of what is out there for us to read. Now I'm going to hand over to Sue, who's only just up the road here in Melbourne, to talk to you about health and leadership.
So thanks, Sandra. Health initiatives include the National Women's Health Strategy, the new clinics for endometriosis and pelvic pain, access to sexual and reproductive health, getting better data to understand women's health outcomes, more training for healthcare workers to support survivors of GBV, and more culturally responsive health services. In December, we heard from Dr. Catherine Trundle, an expert in women's health and heat stress. She showed the physiological impact of heat on women. She also outlined some of the social impacts, especially on poorer households, not having access to air conditioning, women working on the front line dealing with cranky people, and people being socially isolated. With regards to leadership, representation, and decision-making strategies include delivering women's voices, the First Nations program for gender justice, supporting women to run for parliament, ensuring women can lead action on climate change mitigation, adaptation, and response, more women leading in sport, better gender balance on boards, including as chairs of boards, and developing a new international gender equality strategy. Note the important role that media has. We need more diverse stories by women that reflect women's view of the world. The one-pager also shows the government's reporting framework. Each year, there is a status of women report card and a women's budget statement. Then, to measure the strategy, there is the baseline data report and then reports at 5 and 10 years. Let's quickly look at them as they are valuable resources. This is what the Status of Women report card looks like. There is a huge report that goes with it. And again, this shows a few of the stats in the women's budget statement. Again, there is a large report to back up these figures. Finally, this baseline report has to be viewed online for best effect. It covers dozens of indicators, how they are measured and how the data is obtained. It is hard to pin down the essence of the issues raised, but here is a summary of some of these gender equality issues. Gender-based violence, unpaid and paid care, economic equality and security, housing and homelessness, health, including managing heat, and leadership, representation and decision-making. So from all that we have heard, what are your priorities? What areas motivate you to take action? We will do 2 polls, one on climate and the other on gender equality. And here is the first poll on climate-related priorities. What areas would you personally like to advocate for? You may select more than one area. So Carol, can you run the poll, please?
Here it comes. I think the lines have stopped moving now. Anyone else? 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here's the results. Can you see the results?
Okay.
I can. I just, mine, it didn't stay on my screen long enough for me to submit.
Okay, you get
Okay.
All right.
Never mind.
I think there's a bit of tweeting there, but
Yeah.
basically we've got 68% at the moment saying duty of care for future generations is actually coming out quite strongly as a first.
And that's what I was choosing, as well as educating women in STEM. So thanks very much, Susan. I'll be
Phasing out
quiet.
fossil fuel projects coming in second at the moment. Energy efficient homes businesses third. And then we go to educating women in STEM, and then measuring what matters, well-being, budgets, and then hosting COP31, which we would all like to see happen, but wonder what will actually happen from it yet. So yeah, no, that's, I mean, at the moment, it's kind of an indication of where we go. It's not a be or end all. So our second poll, so we've done one on climate and another on gender equality. We're ready to go with that one. Gender equality related issues.
Give me a sec.
So you ready for that one, Carol?
Yeah, I'm just opening it. Yes, people are beginning to answer. I'll let it run a bit longer this time, Vicky.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, yep.
Right.
Okay, so again, we've got as an indication, gender-based violence is coming up first at the moment at 65%. And then equally economic equality and security at 55%, and housing and homelessness. And then we go to leadership, representation and decision making at 45%, and then to unpaid paid care. Okay. All right. So okay, so we've thought about these issues. So who do we raise them with? So now I'm going to hand over to Bernadine Guy, the D24 Governor based in New South Wales, to share some advocacy tools and tips.
Thanks, Sue. So now it's up to us. What can we do? Do you know your local MPs? On this website, you enter your postcode to find out your representative. Click on the name and you will get a profile. Scroll down this page and you'll get links to speeches, and at the very bottom of the page you can click up for more divisions. That takes you here. It shows a graphic of the ayes and no votes and a list of every vote made by your member. A red vertical line by each vote indicates no, and a green vertical line indicates yes. Alternatively, you can go to the Vote for You website, put in your postcode. It brings up a long list of how your member has voted on particular issues. It may not be totally accurate, but it is quick. Want to check if there's already a bill being considered on your issue? On this website, you can search all the bills before Parliament. So do your homework before meeting your members. These are all very valid and good tips. Now you know who to talk to. How will you engage? Will you engage with the MP or the candidate by phone, email, or face-to-face? Will you choose to write an article or a letter to the editor? You could start by writing an article for your club. Do you have a blog? How about social media? And could you create a post or share one? This is what the Union of German Zonta Clubs is developing. They have an information guide and some questions that can be used as social media posts during an election or throughout the year. Each post has one question. Notice that they have categorised their questions into violence against women, women and climate justice, and women in decision-making positions. Don't they look engaging? So back to our list of possible actions. You might choose to do a questionnaire to all candidates and publish the results, or host a Q&A session with all the candidates, or invite one or more candidates to your club meeting. You may have other ideas too. You may choose to magnify your voice by working with another group. For example, Sweltering Cities is a national advocacy group for heat safety. They held the first Extreme Heat Awareness Day on February the 5th with the Red Cross. A webinar on the day highlighted all of the issues related to heat, from the physiology, preparedness, and the difficulties facing renters. They have very practical campaigns that you may choose to support. 1 Million Women is calling on governments to support the electrification of 1 million households in the next 3 years. And the Women's Climate Congress at the end of March has a weekend event in Castlemaine with many climate justice speakers. They are also hosting a members forum on the 26th of February, where Carol will provide a cameo of Zonta Says Now. You may know of more organisations that your club could work with to magnify your message. I'll now hand over to Bridget to lead the discussion.
Thank you, Bernie. So now Carol, were you intending to put us into groups to have a discussion?
Yes, I'll put you into 4 groups.
Okay, so before we get to those 4 groups, really the important part of it is the discussion that you will have with your colleagues in those rooms. And then I think always nominate somebody who's going to be the speaker to come back and talk or to explore the priorities that your group talked about. So Carol, I'll leave that over to you now.
Yep, okay, and I'll just take that off, stop sharing, and I will just put you into rooms. Off you go, Sue. You were group number 1.
Okay. So in our group, we had Alex Meager, Kay Stewart, Anna Horrocks, and Vicky Carmen Brown, and myself. And basically the main issue that people feel for this election they'd like to bring out is the gender-based violence, because there's that very clear connection between sort of climate change and gender-based violence issues, and that's kind of something that Zonta's built around these days. And then if we're looking at a second issue, then the protection of the future of younger generations, so basically supporting our youth. And we were saying that giving stats to show what their future, the data to show what their future does look like in 10 years' time, is a good thing to do to give the politicians and that, and that you've got some of that information. Alex brought up the point and reiterated it, that if we develop some sort of template of sort of that people can basically use, and then they can put in perhaps their own club's particular interests and why, etc. But that, and said that when that was done for the period products template, that worked really well for clubs, that a lot of clubs actually went and put something in it, whereas perhaps they wouldn't have bothered if they didn't have that already done for them as such. So Alex is offering to help with that, and if we've got time in this meeting, maybe we can even use a bit of this extra time now to kind of nut out what would be the main things we'd want to put in that kind of template, and then we can refine it on email and then give it to clubs to have a look at. So I think that's our basic. Anybody else from my group want to say anything else?
We were talking about the template so that people could reach out to their ministers.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Yeah.
So I think that's about our report, Carol.
Yeah, the next one was Sandra Burns' group. Sandra?
Yes, we had quite a good discussion, and about, asking what I found out from the various people who are in our group is that quite a number of them did things in the last election, and they'll probably do similar things in this election. And many of the clubs have got contact with their local parliamentarians. So that was a good thing, because they were talking South Australia, Queensland, Victoria, etc. But interestingly, Susan Davis brought up, well, we have many of the same things that Sue just mentioned about climate change, health, women's violence, etc., those broader subjects. But Susan said, the elephant in the room is the nuclear issue, and that we need to be asking questions about that. And a number of the people in my group also have Teals or independents currently as their members, but of course that doesn't mean that they might get back in anyway. And I think the thing to remember, and we had a little discussion about this too, was that there'll be a whole lot of other people standing who probably haven't been given questions by women's groups before. Mount Barker, and that was Jordana was talking about Mount Barker. They had 2 meetings last time before the elections and invited all the politicians to come along. They gave them a questionnaire first, and they all came except one, all the people who were standing in their area, and they said the meeting was excellent. They sometimes have a staff member from one of their politicians who comes to their meetings, and they send newsletters out to them as well to keep them informed of what the issues are. So there were lots of really great suggestions, concerns about gender-based violence, of course, and homelessness, and particularly amongst older women. And the Zonta Club of Geelong even get on radio talking about, what their issues are and what they want to hear from their politicians. So I think, we had quite a good discussion, and I think probably our issues are going to be fairly similar across the other groups, but the things that clubs do and are already doing, I think is really fantastic. Brilliant. Is there anyone in my group who wants to add? Because I'm a very rough note taker.
Sounds brilliant. Some great work being done.
Yeah, great work.
Group 3 was Bridget. Bridget?
That was me. There's a couple of things that have been covered, so I won't go across them. The one that I think was important was around templates and consistency of message and making it easier for clubs, so that particularly in a federal election, we had a top-down and a bottom-up approach. So that was one of them. We wandered and had some conversations about how we might engage our Z and Golden Z clubs with a youth voice in the discussion, and understanding that most times young people also amplify issues in the home environment as well, so may be influential. The one area where we probably haven't had as much discussion as we would have thought, and it was probably highlighted in the US election, was the role of young men in voting, and how do we as a organisation which is focused on improving the lives of women and girls reach them. So there's an element of reaching politicians, but there's also an element, I think, of speaking to voters directly in a way. Now, that sounds a little bit wishy-washy, but I think it's about how does that message go out and how do we think it's received. Bernie was thinking about a series of statements, a bit like the German Union use on their website, and then it's a bit like our Zonta Says No campaign, isn't it? Yeah. Where there's a whole lot of resources that clubs can use, and if we stuck to 3 or 4 messages, we thought that it was probably important not to have too many issues, but that we had a really strong focus on a couple of them. And then and Jane Baker was talking about keeping it simple so that we don't overcomplicate the message, the suffragettes and the vote for women type of approach that works well because it's repetitive. We also thought about, most politicians rely very heavily on stats. You can actually mount an argument when the statistics are involved, and Australia has got a wealth of reports, so there should be no problem in that respect finding it. In fact, sometimes it's overwhelming the amount of information that we do have. Bernie, Jane, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I think you've done it well.
Okay.
Sounds good. Very good. Good summary.
Thank you.
Excellent. Group 4 was Sandra McLean.
Hi, everybody. I had Cheryl, Jasmine, and Petra in my group. They're extremely rowdy. Anyway, I said if they want to jump in and say something, but I think pretty much what everybody else talked about, and I think the key thing is just to get our key messaging right. For example, a key message is what came out of our think tank today, right? The Zonta Says Now think tank identified 2 key things that are important to us. That's about future generations and the impact on, the impact of DV. So I think we really have to use what we're doing now and really just get our key messaging good, focus our ask around, there's a lot in this space. I think we just need to be really narrow rather than broad. I think we need to have a much more efficient way of getting this information to our MPs. And I know we just talked about that there's a lot in the back end that's required about those certain things. We've all just looked at a response about the new code around protecting women on campus. And that's a letter all set up, you just hit boom, so it's a big issue for Zonta. I think we really need to get better at that sort of thing. And I think we probably need a think tank just on that. And I think we did talk about partnering with organisations that are already very active in this space. For example, perhaps Gender and Disaster Australia. These are national organisations that we just need to let to do the heavy lifting for us. So anything else, team? Cheryl?
Oh, sorry, Sandra. No, I think it basically covers it. Okay. Keep it simple and keep it strong.
Yep. Just focus. The biggest thing is to focus on decide what we want to focus on, I think. Because we can easily get lost in the rabbit hole of many, many things.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and Petra's put that in the chat, that consistent message in just a few places. Yeah.
Mm.
Anyone have anything else that they'd like to raise?
Yeah, one of the other things is that coming from clubs across Australia, we will have different issues within our communities, and with different groups active within those communities. So it's we don't need to duplicate what others are strongly voicing. We need to actually pick what is actually going to be the most effective campaign that we can. And I guess that's a discussion that we're going to have with our clubs.
Yeah, and can I just add to that? I think, cut through around these messages with our clubs, I think is difficult. I still don't think we've got there. Like this think tank now, there's about 9 or 10 of us on here who are part of Zonta Says Now. Like we're already engaged in the conversation. So, a lot of our clubs are very focused on other things that are equally important. But I think if we need to get our messaging good to our members to be our advocates as well.
Carol, can I just say something?
Yeah, sure.
I was just thinking, I think we've got to be prepared for the unexpected because the Liberal Party still hasn't come out with any firm policies. Yeah. So there could be things that might come up on the horizon that we sort of think, no, that's not on. We need to really be prepared then with a statement towards them.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I think one thing concerned me was we had the Working for Women strategy is quite comprehensive, which is what we wanted to try to show today. But what tends to happen is you end up with all these strategies coming out, and that party goes out of power and they all start from the beginning again. And it would be really nice if we were actually to make sure that with any member that comes up to say, well, are you going to continue with the Working for Women strategy? Or what, if not, what have you got? Cheryl, over to you.
I've just want to reply to Nicole's comment about the younger generations. Yep. Bridget posted to all the governors, all the districts yesterday about a request from a young woman that's been put as a youth delegate up to CSW. And she wants to have a youth voice in regard to that. Now, what happens at CSW floats down to the policy development on gender equality at country level. And so if we, here's an opportunity. We've been asked by a very enthusiastic, dynamic young woman who's got policy. She's the policy advisor of CEW. So she the Chief Executive of Women's in Australia. So she really knows her stuff, and she wants to ask what the youth or people under 30, what they think on issues. So the governors will send that out to the Z Club. So of course, we have members in our clubs that are under 30 as well. Well, right. We haven't, but there, some of you do. And to actually engage them would be really fantastic. So I'm just saying that that's an opportunity based on just a response to Nicole.
Okay, good. So we've got quite a few things here. Now, the role of Zonta Says Now in this is really to have the forum to raise the discussion with the advocacy taken up by the advocacy groups, because we don't stand on toes, so to speak. I really take on board a lot of the stuff that's here. So I think what we might do, Bridget, can I sort of say, shall we be guided by what direction you want to take from a Zonta Australia stance on this? Because I think it's something which has to be an all of Australia sort of thing. I mean, we can all help put the things together, but I think the badging really needs to be Zonta Australia.
Thanks, Carol, and I agree. And I think because it's only a short time to the election, we don't have a lot of time to, I suppose, plan and formulate. And I think there's a couple of things that came up today. One was about that uniform message. Cheryl, you talked about community, what clubs want to do locally, and I think that works. But I think for a federal election, if we stick to 3 or 4 and have agreement about what the main issues are, we may get a bit more cut through. Clubs are still more than welcome to do what they want at the local level, because there will be, the green hydrogen plant in Gladstone might be of particular interest to the Gladstone Club. But at the national level, it's about the green energy. If we lift it up, so there'll be some sort of a local level issues, and then lift it up to what we think is, and we have on our website, and I know our website's relatively new, but I'm thinking we already should have a page that has There's some templates we decide as a Zonta Australia group from information, Carol, today, and maybe you come along to the next meeting more specifically, and we work out what are our, and we might have to have an extraordinary meeting because otherwise we're talking about the end of Feb now and it's getting too close. What is it are the 3 messages, and your polling gives us a hint about what we might do. And so we have the template, the scripts, and so the clubs don't have to reinvent anything, and they're there to be used.
Yeah, I put the results up. That's what we had. So
Yeah.
while you're in the rooms.
No, I think that's a good idea, Bridget. I mean, you know, and then if we can get it up on the Zonta Australia site, then we can share that to the district sites.
Correct.
And then filter it down to the clubs. And in the end, it is the clubs that have to do action. So, because we can't, it's not our role to be doing the action for them. But so, you know, but we need to get out there and give them some consistent things. So, I mean, if we picked the major things from here, the duty of care for future generations certainly appears big.
And
the gender-based violence.
Gender-based violence is big, and that's an area in which we're fairly, you know, secure. Economic equality and security and homelessness. I mean, if we had those as, you know, 4 key points, I think that's actually enough.
Yeah.
And maybe Zonta Australia's role there is that I keep going back or thinking about that survey about the policy and legislation that came out this week about universities. Are we quick enough or clever enough to use a technique like that with the policies that might come out? So say one of the parties comes out with a policy that has got red flags all over it from one of these things that is important to us. Do we immediately shoot out a survey with 3 questions in it saying, please send this off to your local politician. This is what we think is important. So I think there is a role for Zonta Australia to be active, but it's a bit like we're using with letters of advocacy, that top-down and bottom-up approach. I think we'll get more cut through. Now, I'm acknowledging we don't have a lot of time between now and when the election will be. Like, it could be at the end of March, so we may... At the bare minimum, I think it would be important that as Zonta Australia, we went through the district governors and said, these are the 3 or 4 important key issues. Please invite all your local pollies to, a bit like Mount Barker, to a dinner meeting or however you want to do it, and focus on these 3 things and ask them what their policies are about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of that's good. All of that's good.
Very
so
doable.
I'm hopefully catch up with my advocacy fairs this week, and we'll be discussing a few things. But yeah, I think I agree. We need to probably have an extra meeting and just see if we can nut this down, because end of Feb's a bit late.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Is everybody happy?
Yep.
Yes. You uncomfortable? No, we just got 5 minutes and I'll just finish off. So other news, virtual art gallery, the deadline's been extended to the 8th of March. Please submit an entry. Just how you feel about the world today is fine. We've got an advocacy webinar series, a closer look at Zonta Says Now at the end of February. It's 2 o'clock Perth time, which is 5 o'clock for many of you. So it's always a bit unfortunate, the timing, but it is there. So there should be a recording of it as well. The NGO CSW Forum in March, and it's Beijing Plus 30. And we've got 2 of the climate conversations outstanding, one on the 12th of the 2nd that I'll be co-facilitating, and there's also one on the 19th of February. Again, for those in the eastern states, the time is horrendous. It's just 11 o'clock. I just feel like a mole sometimes in the dark. And then W20, Bridget sent this through the other day. South Africa is taking over the leadership of W20, which is basically like the gender equality arm of the G20. I think it's the easiest way to think about it. So I just wanted to raise awareness of it, that that is happening. And then the Victorian Congress by the Women's Climate Congress, they have this event on the 28th to 30th of March, and they've got, they've got some quite interesting speakers at it. different workshops and things going on. It looks like it could be a very interesting weekend. And I spoke to Janet Salisbury, and she's very happy to show the Zonta Says Now video during the event. So I know there are Zontians going. So if you can encourage any Zontians to go, great opportunity for networks, finding out who's who in the zoo with regards to climate justice in Australia, because I'm sure a lot will be there. I know this Mary Pickard, for example, she's featured in the background on quite a few of the UN videos of COP conferences. So very well informed people.
She's very good, Mary.
Yeah, excellent. And then you just to be aware that our next meeting won't be on a Saturday, it'll be on a Sunday, because we're clashing with area workshops. So it's going to be on Sunday, the 13th of April. And our speaker will be Professor Carly Cook, the Head Conservation Management Research Group at Monash University. So I think that's all of the key items. And I think we've had a very interesting discussion today. And I just want to thank you all for your contribution, and thank Jane Baker in particular for joining in and being put on the spot and being so good about it. And congratulations to her again with the Women Taking Climate Action Award. And
thank you very much.
That's a pleasure. You have to come and join Zonta, you know, you'll meet lots of people, you know, and because we meet online too. And so there's so many things going on. And thanks again to all the co-hosts today. You've done a brilliant job, and I really appreciate the support you've been giving to Zonta Says Now, and onwards and upwards with Zonta Australia. It's great. So keep breathing, keep smiling, and have fun, and we'll catch up after CSW. Okay.
Thanks, Carol. Bye.
Bye.
Done, Carol.